Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Thank you for joining us this evening on Holocaust Memorial Day for our vigil. We've got a programme this evening which reflects the theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day, Bridging Generations. I'm here on behalf of Sheffield City Council and welcome you this evening. This is a civic event and we ask our guests this evening to respect the contributions from our speakers and guests. We're reminded that Holocaust Memorial Day provides a national mark of respect for all victims of Nazi persecution and demonstrates our understanding with those who still suffer the consequences. It raises awareness and understanding of the events of the Holocaust as a continuing issue of fundamental importance for humanity. It ensures that horrendous crimes, racism and victimisation committed during the Holocaust are neither forgotten nor repeated, whether in Europe or elsewhere in the world, and restates the continuing need for vigilance in light of the troubling repetition of human tragedies in the world today. We're here to remind ourselves that the responsibility of remembrance doesn't end with the survivors. It lives on through their children, their grandchildren, and through all of us. Without further ado this evening, may I introduce the Right Worshipful Lord Mayor of Sheffield, Councillor Safia Said.
Good evening, everyone. Bit louder. We're back from Christmas, no excuses. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. And welcome to the Holocaust Memorial Day 2026. Before I go any further, I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank you all for joining us today. Despite the passage of time and the significant work undertaken today, many UK communities are feeling vulnerable with hostility and suspicion of other acutely rising. We hope that the Holocaust Memorial Day 2026 can be an opportunity for people to come together, learn from the past and take in action, as there are many positive and meaningful things we can do all together to create a better future. The theme of Holocaust Memorial Day 2026, Bringing Generations. It is a reminder that the responsibility of the remembrance doesn't end with the survivors. It lives through on the successful generation and through all of us. As years go by and events like the Holocaust and other genocides becoming more distant, there is a very real danger that memories will fade and people may even start to question the suffering endured by infant, children, adults, and the elderly. As a city, we must be called to act to preserve our history. Bridging Generation highlights how young people play a vital role in keeping Holocaust memories alive through intergenerations and conversations. Sharing these stories ensure history remains relevant today and in the future. We are very privileged to be joined this evening by Tim Mulroy, who will be speaking later, who is one of the speakers from the Northern Holocaust Education Group. Tim's talk, The Last Kindertransport in Prague, shares the powerful story of his father, Hans, and Aunt Hannah. Twins were born in Czechoslovakia in 1928. The Mulroy family enjoy a happy life until the Nazis' invasion in Sutherland distribute everything. In August 1939, Hans and Hannah managed to escape to Britain on the last Kindertransport out of Prague. But their parents, Flex and Irma, along with their elderly sister, Greta, cannot accompany them after war broke out. Sadly, Greta and their parents were later deported to Terezin and murdered in Serbia. Hans' testimony, together with Holocaust records from international sources, help reconstruct the twins' experience. The tragic and inhumane period must be remembered. The City of Sheffield remains committed to raise awareness of the Holocaust and other genocide, promoting solidarity, collective action against oppression, and upholding humanity and kindness for all. This theme urges thoughtful reflection on the past, to listen, to learn, and advance these lessons together. Through such efforts, we connect with memory, with action, and history, with a vision for a better future. Next year, excitingly, the 20th anniversary of Sheffield becoming the first city of sanctuary in the UK, we should feel incredibly proud of those of us who call this welcoming and vibrant city our home. We are truly committed in supporting those who have no choice but to flee their homes thousands of miles away to create a life they truly deserve here with us all. We must value them, we must see them, we must make sure that they are safe and integrated. This evening, Sheffield comes together to remember those who were murdered and challenge those who would distort or deny the past, or who discriminated and prosecuted today. We must work tirelessly to bridge generations, sharing with young people to ensure the light of their experiences is used to brighten the way future. Whoever is in this audience, who have a child, who have a niece, a nephew, a group of people that they train, please tell them these stories. We face together a challenging year. Let's work collectively by bridging the generation to help strengthen global freedoms. This is not your history alone. This is a young people's passed on history. It helps them to shape their identity. It helps them shape their empathy as well as sympathy. It helps to unite. And also, it helps the unity to go forward to better future. So please, challenge yourself tomorrow. Who will you tell the stories to? Bridging generation isn't just a word or a theme. It is an action to help strengthen the global freedoms and build a better future for everyone. Thank you again. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. We come together, as the Lord Mayor has said, to remember and to reflect under the theme of bridging generations. At this vigil in 2024, I was humbled to hear the testimony shared with us by Hedi Arjen, who escaped Nazi persecution, arriving in England with her family in 1939. For survivors like Hedi, the Holocaust is not to be found in history books. It is their families' lives. It is lived experience remembered and shared across and within generations. As the years pass and fewer survivors can share their first-hand testimony with us in person, the responsibility to make sure that the darkness of the Holocaust is never forgotten passes to us all. So today, we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women and children who were systematically murdered and all those who've been murdered in subsequent genocides. We must ensure that the experiences of the past are used not only to honour the memories of those who were persecuted and murdered, but to connect those experiences to our present. We all have a clear duty, as the Lord Mayor said, to listen, educate ourselves and others so that we shape our society today. Whoever hears a witness becomes a witness. So today in 2026, we must all show up and stand together against prejudice and against those who seek to divide us. Bridging generations is therefore a duty and a call to action. The Italian author and Holocaust survivor Primo Levi wrote, "We cannot understand fascism, but we can and we must understand from where it springs. And we must be on our guard, because what happened can happen again. For this reason, it is everyone's duty to reflect on what happened." So tonight, let us reflect on the actions we can take, individually and collectively, to learn from the past, build a bridge to the present, and work to build a better future. But let us also be on our guard and know that we cannot let it down. But from darkness comes light, and know this: through our actions, we can provide hope and we can bring people together. And this year we will, with a series of events in this city to bring people of Sheffield together and to celebrate our diversity. Let us proudly reaffirm Sheffield's commitment to being a welcoming, tolerant, inclusive and diverse city, but also act to defend that. In 2027, as we've heard, we will and must have a city-wide celebration of being the UK's first city of sanctuary. It is through these actions and more that we can strive to ensure that our future is free from oppression, hatred, racism, and persecution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. We have a reflection from the chair of the Sheffield Race Equality Partnership, Fatima Khan Shah.
Today is a day that is really close to my heart. It is Holocaust Memorial Day. And it's never been lost on me as a child of immigrants that we are very fortunate that by chance we are born in a place where safety is something that we expect to have rather than a privilege. It's a time every year where we come together not simply to mark a historical event, but to recollect and think about the human tragedy that continue to leave a stain on our history, both now as well as in the past. The Holocaust was a deliberate attempt to erase an entire people, to assault their life, their culture, and their dignity. It is a stark reminder of where division and hate can take us if it's left unopposed and unchallenged, and when prejudice becomes policy and indifference becomes the norm. Sadly, these circumstances are not too unfamiliar for us in this day and age, and I always reflect on the fact that if we start to focus on a group of individuals and make it okay to prejudice or assault their way of life, where do we stop? Today we mark and honour the 6 million Jewish people, both men, women and children, who were murdered. We also remember that it wasn't just the Jewish community that was impacted. There were Roma people, Sinti communities, people living with disabilities, people with different sexual orientations, people that had different political views, and loads of others that were targeted by the Nazi regime. On this day, we learn to commemorate where persecution leads people and also remember persecution that is taking place right now all across the world. We know that prejudice continues today, even within our communities and cities and places across the UK. To me, these people are not statistics, they're stories. They're people, human beings with lives, aspirations and dreams. And my commitment to you all, as the chair of the Sheffield Race Equality Partnership, is that these individuals, along with others, will not be forgotten. We reaffirm our commitment that this city will not be a place where intolerance is validated or tolerated. We stand united against hatred and will continue to fight for equality in all its forms. I hope that while reflecting on today, we also focus on the hope that is the future, because the fact that we're taking time to reflect on this shows that we will always reflect and learn from history and hopefully not repeat the same mistakes.
The Holocaust was a global tragedy that claimed the lives of over 6 million Jewish men, women and children. By the end of the Second World War, the full extent of this horror was only just being discovered by the ordinary people across the world. Today, as we move further into the 21st century, the generations who lived through it are passing away. The theme for Holocaust Memorial Day 2026 is Bridging Generations. It is a call for action for us, the younger generation, to take responsibility for remembrance.
As 14-year-olds, we feel this responsibility deeply. We are the active custodians of these stories. We see how safety for discriminated groups can be incredibly fragile, vanishing almost overnight as people are forced to navigate uncertainty and fear. One such story is that of Harry Louis, who was just one of the estimated 300,000 Jewish people made refugees during the Holocaust.
This history isn't just in textbooks. For me, it is felt. Growing up Czech, I know the familiar story of Harry's escape from the Sudetenland after the 1938 Munich Agreement. He was one of the approximately 175,000 people who fled those horrors. On the night of the 30th of September 1938, as German troops crossed the border into Czechoslovakia, Harry had only hours to decide: stay and risk persecution, or leave behind everything he knew.
Harry's story is preserved in the book Flight from Prague, written by his son, Michael Lewis. This book describes a perilous journey across Nazi Germany and war-torn Europe. What allowed Harry to persevere through the terrors of border crossings were small acts of kindness that kept his hope alive. From this, we learn that empathy is essential and atrocities happen when this key principle is ignored. We must learn compassion to create a society where we treat everyone with care and dignity.
Our school has a direct link to this history. Michael Lewis, the author, was the head teacher of King Edward VII School for 20 years. His parents, Harry and Helen, were both Jewish and faced extreme danger. While Harry lived a life of displacement as a refugee, his future wife, Helen, was a dancer who eventually liberated from Auschwitz.
Learning about their lives is a stark reminder that our generation has a vital part to play. We are the bridge between the past and the future. Remembrance isn't just about looking back at bravery. It's a caution and a lesson for us as future leaders. It teaches us the devastating impact that the misuse of power and discrimination can have on the world.
Many of us have our own links back in time, whether it is my connection to the Czech people or others rediscovering family history. Like a great-grandfather's family facing death in occupied Poland, these accounts must be shared. The more we learn, the less likely it is that these lives will slip into history.
We use books and testimonies as witnesses to provide evidence of the past. By listening to these voices, we build a bridge between memory and action. Knowledge of the Holocaust must be learnt by everyone, so we can ensure that such a catastrophic event never happens again and will be never forgotten.
We must do the right thing now. We must take the time to remember so that we never have to fear a future where the stories of over 6 million victims have been forgotten. We are the next generation. We will keep the memory alive.
Thank you for so eloquently illustrating the importance of this year's theme, Bridging Generations. I'd like to invite Professor Jane Ginsburg from the Reformed Jewish Congregation to share her reflection, please.
I am a Jew. Tonight I represent progressive Jews in Sheffield, but I'm also speaking for myself. Last night I spoke at the civic event in Barnsley, where generations were bridged very effectively, just as they have been right now with the students from Tapton. Thank you so very much. The Anne Frank Trust brought together young people who spoke as passionately to us older people as we did, I hope, to them. There are very few Holocaust survivors left now to talk to younger generations. And while I want to acknowledge and thank them and the survivors of other genocides that we commemorate today, I also want to acknowledge how hard it can be to speak out. My late parents were Jewish and the same generation as Holocaust survivors such as Marla Tribich, aged 95, who spoke to the cabinet in Downing Street today. My mother was evacuated to America at the beginning of the war and didn't find out about the Holocaust until she returned. My father's parents had fled to London from pogroms in Russia 20 years earlier. My grandmother, who was another Marla, used to say they'd come between the revolutions. They hosted refugees from Germany in the 1930s, and they just talked in whispers about the concentration camps and the deportations. The systematic murder of nearly 12 million people in death camps, including 6 million Jews, not to mention a further 5 million murdered before the camps were established, was unknowable and unthinkable. In 1945, the British government commissioned a film about the camps that could be shown to ordinary German citizens so that they could see the full extent of the crimes committed by the Nazis. The producer they commissioned was my great-uncle, Sidney Bernstein. He was my mother's uncle, and I knew him well. He trained some of the British soldiers who were about to liberate Bergen-Belsen to use film cameras and record what they found there. Almost all the original images and film of the camps that you've ever seen are taken from that footage and from a reel of film shot by the Russian soldiers who liberated Auschwitz-Birkenau. Sidney could not bring himself to edit the film footage. It was simply too horrific. He asked his friend, the director Alfred Hitchcock, to do that. The film is called simply German Concentration Camps, Factual Survey. It was never shown to German citizens. The Allies needed them to help rebuild Germany. It wasn't shown, indeed, to anybody else for 70 years. You can watch a documentary by André Singer about the making and the official suppression of Sidney's film very late tonight. Channel 4 is showing it at 10 past midnight. It was released in 2014. It's called Night Will Fall. Meanwhile, Sidney's daughter Jane, my cousin, we're named for the same mother, grandmother, restored and completed the original film, and it was first shown at the British Film Institute in 2017. She has also made it her life's work to continue her father's mission. She has documented genocides in Darfur, Armenia, Cambodia, Rwanda, Tibet, and Myanmar. To underline this year's theme, her company is called 3 Generations. The psychological scars of suffering can endure for life and they can be passed on to their children. Many survivors feared damaging their children with the knowledge of the suffering they'd endured, or indeed the knowledge of how they had endured and survived, since we know from many accounts that survival was often at the expense of the suffering of others. Survivors cannot be blamed for not speaking out. The consequences could be terrible. The chemist and writer Primo Levi wrote about his experiences, but couldn't bear his memories or his feeling of guilt at having survived. He took his own life. Rudolf Werber was imprisoned in Auschwitz when he was a teenager. He was determined not only to memorize everything he saw and heard there, but also to escape and to tell the world. He was one of a vanishingly small number of Jews who did manage to escape when he was 17, but at first nobody believed what he told them. Eventually his reports did get to the right authorities, and 200,000 Jews in Budapest were saved from deportation to Auschwitz. After testifying at the Nuremberg trials, Werber never spoke of his experiences again. He'd become a scientist, and many of his colleagues and students were astonished to find out about his previous life from Jonathan Friedland's book, The Escape Artist. There was no formal or informal Holocaust education when I was growing up, other than Anne Frank's diary. So I'm glad that my children, now adults, were taught about the Holocaust at school, as you are now. We could take them to Jewish museums and Holocaust memorials. There were meetings with survivors prepared to talk about their lives and experiences. There were books to read. There were films and TV programs to watch. Such education is vital if future generations are to learn from previous generations. You too may have heard on the radio this morning about the halving of schools now commemorating Holocaust Memorial Day. I really hope this can be reversed. It's vital for our children and our children's children to learn not only about the Jewish Holocaust, but also more recent genocides, and above all, to make the connection between othering, dehumanization, and the systematic murder of people simply because of who they are. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Never again must mean never again, le dor vador, from one generation to another, in our generation and in all the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me today to share my family Holocaust testimony. We've heard on many occasions already about the 6 million Jewish people that died during the Holocaust, and it's very difficult to conceptualize these 6 million. So I'm going to tell you my family story, and hopefully it will be a little bit more relatable and a little bit more understandable. My father and aunt travelled on the last kinder transport from Prague, organised by Sir Nicholas Winton. And the genocide of around 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe happened between 1939 and 1945. But as I say, I hope you'll find this a sort of an uplifting story as well. My father's family were from Czechoslovakia. You can see the country as the green shape in the middle of the map in the centre of Europe. They lived in Pilsen. The family were Jewish. They weren't devout Jews, but they did visit the synagogue occasionally. You can see the great synagogue in Pilsen on the right-hand side of the photo. On the left is an aerial picture of the Skoda works in Pilsen. Now, Pilsen is a very similar city to Sheffield. It has mining, it has iron and steel production, and heavy industrial manufacturing, particularly armaments, which is, as I say, makes it very similar to Sheffield. And the Skoda works, which employed roughly 30,000 people, was a significant contributor to the economy. I'm talking about the Skoda works because my grandfather worked there. He was a warehouse manager. He lived near the centre of Pilsen and walked to work. It took him about 15 minutes. And I'll just show you a sort of a family tree. I recognise it's a little bit small, but just for reference, I'm down there at the bottom. You can see my father above me with his two sisters, left and right, and the Cohen family on the left, my grandfather and his family, and the Humberger family on the right. So I'm going to show you a few photographs of my family. This is a photograph of my grandparents, Felix and Irma, on their wedding day in 1923. And this was my aunt Marketa. She was born about a year later. They had, a few years later, they had two more children, Hans and Hannah, born in 1928. The family lived, as I said, in an apartment. Cities in the sort of centre of Europe didn't tend to have semi-detached, detached houses. Most people lived in apartments. Pilsen didn't have a Jewish sort of centre, Jewish district, but the apartment block, people, both Jews and non-Jews, lived there. Hans and Hannah both enjoyed going to school. Hans was a very keen footballer. He played goalkeeper for his school football team. Hannah didn't particularly enjoy sport, but she did love reading, and she also liked music, and she played the piano. So that's, as I say, so there's Hans and Hannah. This is their grandmother, Sophie, and Sophie's daughter, their aunt Adela. And they used to visit Sophie and her daughter every weekend for tea. On the other side of the family, the Hamburger family, there's a picture of Irma there on the left, and the two, Hannah and Hans, with their Uncle Arnold. He was their favourite uncle. He used to take them to the park in the summer to buy them ice cream, and in winter, when they went ice skating, he used to buy them hot chocolate afterwards. I'm showing you now a map of Europe before the Second World War, and you can see Germany dominating the centre of Europe. As I'm sure you know, Hitler rose to power in 1933, and people, particularly Jews in Germany, started to feel threatened by what Hitler was saying. Hitler hated the Jews. He had this obsession with basically trying to get rid of the Jews. Jews he saw were unclean. He wanted a pure Aryan race, and Jews were basically detrimental to that. So he made no secret of his intention to get rid of the Jews by some means or other. So the Jewish people in Germany wanted to try and leave, and some indeed did leave and moved to Austria and to Czechoslovakia. As we know, Hitler then basically took over Austria with the Anschluss Agreement, and soon afterwards started to threaten Czechoslovakia, or certainly the western side of Czechoslovakia. And of course, this transpired in 1938 with the invasion of the Sudetenland. In Central Europe, there was general freedom of movement. People moved for work purposes between Austria, Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. To do this, you tended to need a common language, and of course the common language there was German. So Hitler marched into the Sudetenland because his justification was that many people in the Sudetenland spoke German, so the Sudetenland should be part of Germany. This was the excuse, the justification he used at in the Munich, and an agreement. Neville Chamberlain signed the agreement for peace in our time in September 1938. The problem, obviously, for people in Czechoslovakia, the rest of Czechoslovakia, was that they knew that Hitler wouldn't be satisfied with simply taking the Sudetenland. He would take the rest of Czechoslovakia as well. This is, again, a sort of a closer map of German annexation of the Sudetenland. The reason I've shown you this is because if you see to the west, basically the west of Czechoslovakia, almost on the border of the Sudetenland, is Pilsen. People in Pilsen, particularly the Jews in Pilsen, started to become even more frightened, even more concerned about what was happening, because they knew it wouldn't be very long before Hitler took over and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. They knew they would be next. And of course, in 1939, as had been expected and feared for many months, Hitler's armies moved into Czechoslovakia. At this point, Felix and Irma, as parents, didn't know what they could do. They knew that they couldn't escape from Czechoslovakia and leave the persecution, because they'd heard of the persecution happening in Austria and in Germany. They knew the laws would be rolled out to Czechoslovakia as well, and they wanted to do everything they could to help their children. And after the invasion in March 1939 of the rest of Czechoslovakia, Felix and Irma took the heartbreaking decision that they would try and send their children away to safety in Britain. And through family contacts in Prague, they heard of a gentleman called Nicholas Winton. They knew that they weren't a rich family. They couldn't afford to try and bribe officials, to try and obtain visas. They knew they couldn't get out of Czechoslovakia. But they hoped that their children, they could send their children somewhere safe. And they managed to get their children's names on the Winton list. So they relied on Nicholas Winton being able to find foster families for the children in Britain. This is a photograph of the 3 children, Marketa, Hans and Hannah, that was sent to Britain. And it ended up with the Sheffield Refugee Committee, chaired by David Brown. And it was David Brown and his team who organised the foster families for these children in South Yorkshire. Hans was the first to be chosen, I suppose, by the foster family, and it was by a gentleman called Harold Mulroy in Rotherham. Hannah, he couldn't afford to foster 2 children because the government made the stipulation that an unlimited number of children could come to Britain, but a guarantee of £50 had to be paid for each child. Now, £50 doesn't sound too much today, but in 1938-39, £50 was roughly equivalent to £4,000 in today's money. So if you, as a potential foster parent, you would have to pay £4,000 and then obviously pay for the upkeep of the child. So it did put a lot of people off. Fortunately, Nicholas Winton said, well, no problem, we will arrange sponsorship, fundraising to help families. Because this arrangement for the Kindertransport, for bringing children to Britain, had already been started in Austria and Germany, a lot of Jewish families who were wanting to foster a child in Britain had already taken an Austrian or a German child. So as far as Nicky Winton was concerned, he said, well, it doesn't have to be a Jewish family. It can be a Gentile family or an agnostic family even, as long as they can give a safe and happy place for a child. This put him sort of upset a number of the Jewish elders in Britain because they didn't want young Jewish children coming to Britain and being turned away from their faith. But Nicholas Winton said, well, better a healthy, happy child than a dead Jew. So he ignored them and continued to bring children through 1939 to Britain and to foster families across the country. This was the route of the train through, basically from Prague through Czechoslovakia and then through Germany, across the border into Holland, and then across by boat to Harwich and then by train to London. Of course, the children would then have to go from London to Sheffield by train, which they did. I'm just going to play you a short clip of Hannah's recollections of the journey.
My twin brother was called Hans, and we were 10 years old when our parents told us that they were sending us to England. And now we were to embark on a long journey to England. There we were to spend a considerable time with 2 English families, apparently for the purpose of learning English. We had never seen our beautiful capital before, that's Prague, never seen the sea, never been abroad or anywhere without our parents. And so it was with great anticipation that we set off by car to Prague. We chatted excitedly with our sister Greta, who was to join us in England later, unaware of our mothers and fathers' mounting tension and silence.
It must be indescribable to try and think how the parents felt about giving their children away. As Hannah said, they were 10 years old, but the courage of the parents to do that is, I think, absolutely incredible. So they got on the train, they arrived at Victoria Railway Station in Sheffield, and they met their foster parents. And so this is, sorry, I'll just go back one. That's right. So this is Hannah's documents. It's not actually a visa, but it's a permit to come into Britain. And this is the Winton list in 1939. So this is a list of the 669 children. I promise I won't go through all 669 children today, but I would like to show you page 12 of the list. You can see near the bottom, third from the bottom, there's Hannah. Hannah's name. She was fostered by the Crooks family in Cllr in Sheffield. Hans was fostered by Harold Mulroy and his wife Kath at Meadowhall Road, so in Kimberworth, overlooking Meadowhall Shopping Centre. And there is a name missing from that list, Greta or Marketa Cohn. She, sadly, because there was a delay in getting the £50 bond from the foster family, they decided that she would follow on the next train. Sadly, she was on a train waiting at the railway station in Prague to leave for the Hook of Holland when war was declared. If the train had left 2 days earlier, or war had been declared 2 days later, she would have been able to join her brother and sister in South Yorkshire. Sadly, she didn't have the opportunity to do so, and she went back to her parents and ultimately perished in one of the death camps in Poland. So, after war was declared, and Hannah and Hans realised that they wouldn't be seeing their sister in England, they corresponded through the Red Cross and were able to send and receive letters. This is a copy of a photograph that was sent to their parents in the back garden in Cllr with Mrs. Crooks and Bob the dog. For the parents, the situation in Czechoslovakia was getting worse and worse. The laws that had been implemented in Germany and Austria were rolled out into Czechoslovakia, making life very, very difficult for Jewish people in Czechoslovakia. And ultimately, in January 1942, all the Jews in Pilsen were rounded up and sent by train, cattle trucks, to Terezin or Theresienstadt in Germany. Terezin was what I would say was a ghetto, also a transit camp as well, people going to and from. Many Jews were sent from Terezin to the killing camps, the 6 killing camps in Poland, particularly Auschwitz. And this is, again, a map just showing the location of Terezin in the north of Czechoslovakia, and also in the squares, the black and white squares, the 6 extermination camps. This is, again, a slide you've seen earlier, which is the family before the Holocaust, and this is an indication of the family. I've colour-coded the family after the Holocaust. The green is those who survived. The red is those who perished. And as you can see, there are far more red than green. Hannah and Hans survived, and also great-granny, my great-granny Sophie. She was liberated from Terezin. For some unknown reason, she was not sent to Auschwitz or Sobibor like the rest of her family. She stayed in Terezin, and she was liberated by the Russians, I think it was, in 1945. She was 78 years old. So the women in my dad's family do tend to be fairly resilient. And so as I say, they were the only 3 that survived, all the rest perished. The 2 in grey are ones who died between the wars. Hannah and Hans realised in 1945, when war was over, they thought, fantastic, we can go back and see our family and friends in Czechoslovakia. The news came through from Pilsen that their family had not survived the Holocaust. Granny Sophie did send some family mementos, including some of the photographs that I've shown you tonight. But when they found out that their parents had perished, they decided to be adopted by their foster parents. They were adopted at 20 years old. Hans became Hans Mulroy, and then when he went to university, he changed his first name to John because Hans sounds a bit Germanic. So he became John Mulroy. There's a photograph of him. His adoption paper is on the left, his photograph of him at university, and his degree certificate. Hans and Hannah came to Britain at 10 years old. They didn't know a word of English. They both passed their 11 plus. Hannah went to high school in Sheffield. Hans went to Maltby Grammar School in Rotherham. Hannah went to Sheffield University. She became a languages teacher, a German teacher, would you believe. Hans trained and qualified as a doctor, general practitioner, and he practiced the whole of his career in Rotherham. This is Hannah, a picture of Hannah from a few years ago. She's 97 and still with us. She used to give talks, like I'm doing now, to groups and societies and schools in Liverpool. When she was 85, she decided she was getting a bit old for this sort of thing. So I said to her, I'd love to tell the family story. So I suppose this is an example of bridging generations. And it's an absolute pleasure to tell my story. I've spent a lot of time with Hannah, learning, understanding my feelings, her feelings and what happened to her growing up in Czechoslovakia, and how she feels. She tells me something new every time I visit, and I'll let her know that I've had a great experience talking to you tonight. Sadly, my father passed away in about 30 years ago, suddenly, and I never had a chance to explore his feelings of the Holocaust with him, because I suppose at that time you didn't talk about things. So, Hannah never had children. I think the trauma of being given away by her parents at 10 years old really affected her, and she decided she couldn't have children. But fortunately, my father did. And he had 4 children, and between us, we've produced 8 children. So this is the 3rd generation. They're all very proud of their Czech heritage. We've all been, as a family, to Prague. Hannah took me to Prague with my sister in the year 2000, and we decided to reciprocate, and we all took Hannah back to Prague for her 80th birthday. So it was quite nice, again, to see that. I've also wanted to commemorate my family, and again, thinking about a national Holocaust, that's okay, but it's so important to recognize the individual people who lived their lives, and to make sure that they are going to be remembered. So I applied and have had accepted Stolpersteins, or stumbling stones. And these you'll see in many European countries, Central European countries. And these will be put on the pavements outside the house where people lived. And so my grandparents, my great-aunts, and my great-grandparents, those stumbling stones will be there to remember individuals who perished in the Holocaust. I've just got one more clip to show you, which is Hannah's reflections.
I would really like to stress the point that from our own experiences, I wish my brother was here to put his point of view, which might have been a little different from mine. But I know we have found, generally speaking, the English, the British people, extremely kind and extremely helpful. And I would like to say that I'm particularly aware of how kind non-Jewish people were, as far as we are concerned. The 2 families that adopted us gave us just unconditional love and opportunity for becoming part of the family and getting a good education. And I just can't say enough in praise of them in that way. We are very grateful to them.
So Hannah and John's legacy, they were Holocaust survivors, first generation Holocaust survivors, and it was Nicholas Winton's last transport that saved them. Obviously their understanding of what their parents did to keep them safe, to keep them alive, was that's their legacy. Pride in their Czech Jewish heritage and also being British. And also becoming members of the caring professions. It's so interesting that many of the Kindertransport went into the caring professions. They became doctors, they became nurses, they became teachers, they became social workers, and they put back so much into their communities. And that makes me very proud. I've got a couple of quotes that, about the Holocaust, but I think those photographs that I've shown you have a great impact on people living their lives, decent people. They didn't deserve to be murdered in the Holocaust. And I'll just finish with the last photograph of myself and Hannah at her house. And I think that epitomizes the bridging generations. And I hope to continue to give my talk to schools and organizations for some time into the future. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim, for sharing a very poignant family story with us, with a very clear link to Sheffield and South Yorkshire. It's incredible to hear and a privilege to hear your story and your family's story. Thank you. I'd like to invite Lorna Waddington, who's the Associate Professor at the University of Leeds, to come and share. Thank you.
So thank you very much to Sheffield City Council for inviting me to speak today. Holocaust Memorial Day is a moment to remember the victims of the Holocaust and to reflect on what history teaches us about genocide. The Holocaust did not occur in isolation. It was one of several genocides of the modern era, and tragically, as we all know, it was not the last. The Holocaust demonstrated how a modern society can mobilize prejudice. It can dehumanize ideology, carry out mass murder. As we've talked about today, over 6 million Jewish people were murdered alongside various other groups. They were murdered because of who they were. They were targeted because of this. The crimes didn't happen suddenly. They unfolded over time through laws, through institutions in Germany, and through systems that stripped the people of their rights, their dignity, and ultimately their life. In 1941, as evidence of Nazi crimes began to reach Britain, it was Churchill who described what was happening as a crime without a name. At that point, the world lacked the language to describe a systematic destruction of an entire people. In 1944, it was a Polish Jewish lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, who created the word genocide, from genus meaning people and side meaning killings. Lemkin understood that naming a crime was essential, not only for history, but for the recognition in law, education, and remembrance. Despite the lessons of the Holocaust, despite never again, as we all know, genocide has occurred again and again. In Cambodia, nearly 2 million people were killed under the Khmer Rouge. This was approximately 25% of the population. In Rwanda, in 1994, over a period of 100 days, over 800,000 people were killed. And then back on European soil, 1992, images of emaciated concentration camp victims from Bosnia. And approximately 50 years after Auschwitz was liberated, once more it was genocide in Europe, with the murder of over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys, despite an international presence. Each case took place in a different context, but all involved the systematic targeting of civilian populations who it had been decided didn't belong. My engagement with these histories isn't just academic. I want to acknowledge John Cllr, whose words you can see here. John dedicated, after retiring, he dedicated many years of his life to speaking to young people about his Holocaust experiences. It was his hope that education would build a better future. I was privileged to meet John on a number of occasions, and his testimony had a lasting influence on my work. Ibn Il, I was also privileged to meet Ibi several times. After John's death, Ibn Il, she chose to speak publicly. She'd had decades of silence, but following John's death, she felt it was important that she continue to speak out. She was convinced that the responsibility of testimony couldn't be allowed to disappear. And these are Ibi's words. This is why testimony matters. As we've heard, as the number of living survivors diminishes, their voices become even more precious. Testimonies do more than convey historical facts. They humanize history. They challenge denial. And they ensure that those who were murdered are remembered as individuals, not as abstractions. This is why commemoration matters. Holocaust Memorial Day isn't just about marking a day in the calendar. It's about safeguarding memory. It's ensuring that these histories, and indeed all survivor histories, are remembered with dignity and they're passed on responsibly to future generations. By remembering the Holocaust and other genocides, we honour the victims, we respect the survivors, and we affirm the importance of historical understanding, education, and remembrance. Thank you.
I feel privileged to come and share a reflection and also to listen to the reflections of others. Today, as we gather to remember one of humanity's darkest chapters, the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish lives, along with millions of others persecuted for who they were. They were extinguished in an act of unimaginable cruelty. As the years pass and the number of survivors diminishes, our responsibility to remember grows more urgent. Our shared responsibility to remember grows more urgent. Memory must not fade with time, it must be carried forward. The theme for this year, Bridging Generations, reminds us that remembrance is not confined to those who lived through these horrors. It is a shared duty, a bridge linking past, present, and future. Survivors have given us their stories, they've given us their wisdom, and they've given us their warnings. It's now upon us to ensure that these voices continue to speak, even when they can no longer be heard in person. They speak through education, through dialogue, and through empathy, and we keep their legacy alive. Bridging generations means more than passing down facts. It means sharing values. It means sharing human dignity, compassion, and vigilance against hatred. Genocide doesn't begin in gas chambers. It begins with words. It begins with prejudice. It begins with indifference. And each generation must learn this truth anew so that never again is not just a slogan but a lived reality. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday we celebrated on the 15th of January, said this. He said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." He said, "Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And so let's pledge today to be the bridge, to listen, to learn, and to teach. Let's ensure that the memory of the Holocaust and of all atrocities becomes a light guiding future generations toward a world where humanity triumphs over hatred. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Bussey. I'd like to invite the students from Stockstreet High School to come and share their reflection, please.
Right then. Good evening, everyone. First, I would just like to start off by saying a really big thank you to the Sheffield City Council for their invite to this great event. We, as a school and ourselves, are incredibly proud and happy to be here. So I would like to now start our speech, and I would like to say that we are here from Stockstridge to talk about something that seems just so impossible that it really shouldn't have happened, but the sad truth is that it did, and I'm of course talking about the Holocaust.
Today, on Holocaust Memorial Day, we gather here to remember the 6 million Jewish people murdered in the Holocaust, alongside millions of others that were persecuted in the Nazi regime. Remember not only their deaths, but their lives, their loves, and the futures they hoped for, and the futures which brave soldiers had fought for. This day reminds us that remembering is not just important, it's a responsibility, a commitment to learning, to reflection, and to humanity.
This year's theme, Building Generations, asks us to think about the ways we connect with the past, the present, and the future. Generations aren't simply built through the passing of time. They're built through the passing of stories, values, memories, and the truth. Without these things, our world would be shaped very differently today. The lessons that we choose to preserve today will shape the world that our generation's children will inherit tomorrow.
Intergenerational dialogue sits at the heart of this. When we listen to those who were older than us, history becomes not just about dates and events, but something personal and timeless. When young people like us share their questions and perspectives, they ensure that remembrance is not lost in the past, but is active and relevant in the present.
For decades, Holocaust survivors have built and maintained the bridge between generations, passing down their incredible stories and testimonies so we can understand what hatred, discrimination, and indifference can lead to. Their stories help us see the Holocaust not as an unimaginable event, but as something very real and the consequence of a series of human decisions that had the power to cause such destruction. Now, we have the power to reverse this destruction and instead to make the world a better place, one in which compassion and kindness towards all are the main values.
A story has the power to change the world, especially one like this. But as time moves on, fewer survivors remain with us. This is why our generation and every other generation to come needs to pass the stories on for the sake of a better future for all of us. When you hear a survivor speak, even just one, it stays with you for a lifetime. A single story has the power to reshape how we see one another. It shows us how stories are how we build generations. They anchor us, teach us, and shape who we become.
Unfortunately, a promise that was made following the Holocaust tragedy, never again, has been broken. Not just once, but multiple times in the years following the conclusion of World War II. We must acknowledge these with honesty, just like any other. Today is labelled as Holocaust Memorial Day, but it is also to honour the victims of many other genocides. For example, the Tutsi tribe in Rwanda, 1994. The Bosnian men and boys murdered in Srebrenica, 1995. And the communities devastated by the violence in Darfur from 2003 and onwards.
Each of these atrocities shows us that hatred cannot be confined to just one place in time or a moment. It reveals to us the prejudice and hate still left in our modern world. It shows how, if these things are left unchallenged, they can escalate into something much bigger, slowly at first, and then devastatingly fast.
By listening to the stories of these communities, by connecting their experiences across generations and continents, we strengthen our understanding and our shared responsibility to confront prejudice whenever and wherever it emerges. The lessons from history are clear. Genocide does not begin with killing. It begins with words and ideas of hatred, that then spreads into progressive dehumanization of certain groups. Intergenerational dialogue gives us the tools to recognize these early warning signs. It helps us develop the moral courage to speak up when something isn't right.
Our generation, standing in the middle, plays a vital role. We are old enough to learn from survivors and witnesses, yet young enough to pass on their lessons. We are the connection threads, the weavers of the next generation's understanding.
Bridging generations does not require grand gestures. It begins with small, everyday choices. Listening to the stories of those older than us, creating space for young people to engage honestly with difficult history. Challenging prejudice, intolerance, and language that diminishes others. And choosing empathy over indifference. These choices can shape the kind of society that future generations will live in. So today, as we remember, we also look forward. We commit ourselves to becoming memory keepers, ensuring that the lives and lessons of those who suffered in the Holocaust and in later genocides are carried forward with dignity and with truth.
We can build kind and compassionate generations rather than ones based on hatred and prejudice. And, in doing so, we work towards a future that honours and respects the past, a future which is safer, kinder, and better for all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you to the students of Stocksbridge for their reflections and commitments. I'd like to introduce the Reverend Hugh Thomas, who is the Interfaith Advisor for the Diocese of Sheffield.
Thank you for this invite. I also bring apologies from Bishop Pete, my boss, who can't be here this evening, but he is very much here in spirit. He's on duty in the House of Lords, lucky him, so he would be here otherwise, but he asked me to pass those on. I am the Interfaith Advisor, but that's not the important role I feel here tonight now, because I also have a day job, which is to be the Diocesan Director of Education. It means I'm responsible for the 39 church schools in basically Rotherham, Doncaster, Sheffield, a bit of Barnsley, the 39 church schools. And I'm thinking this evening about last week when I was writing to them, doing yet another reminder of this day coming up to ensure that this day gets marked in our schools. And I was reflecting that I think my generation were on a cusp. I can remember not hearing much about the Holocaust at school. It was not on the curriculum when I was at school. I can actually remember the stories coming out when I was about the age of the folks who've just spoken to us and spoken to us earlier. I can remember things like the ITV documentary, The World at War, which I think broke something of the story. I can actually remember Nicholas Winton in that moment on That's Life, where he met some of the young people who were now much older. And there was a drama done as well that was bringing the story home to us. It is now expected that young people should know, and all of us should know this. It's now expected. It should be expected, and we must commit to that expectation. And that's why I do want to say any reduction of schools holding this day troubles me greatly. It's something we need to watch out for. We need to ask ourselves why that is happening and do something about the fact that it is happening. That's certainly a commitment I'm making, having heard some of the news I think Jane referred to, we heard this morning. Now, I can't catch. If you threw a bunch of keys to me now, they would land on the floor. And I grew up in Wales, unable to catch. If you think of the rugby in Wales, that's why I'm in England. You're not so good at it, it's safe here. So I took to the track, I did athletics. I don't remember much of the training, but I remember the intensity of it. But again, when I was writing to our schools last week, one image that came to my mind from that track, and it was the amount of training you do in the relay. The whole business of, I'm not going to demonstrate it, but the whole business of the baton being passed from one to the other. But how much time and intensity we put into perfecting that moment in the relay race, how important that was. I think that's a fitting image for what I think we're hearing tonight when we hear a bridge being built, when we hear of the need to build that bridge. I don't want to trivialize in any way the import of what we're considering tonight. But if we can take so much effort making sure we pass a piece of stick so that we win a particular race in a particular sports day in our schools, how much effort should we take in passing on the baton that we remember today in this event? How important must that be? Because this is a thing we do, this action that we do every January the 27th, this vital thing that we do. It's about memorial, it's about history, but I also suggest it's about handing on, passing on a baton between generations. Keeping that message alive. Tom, the phrase you used, whoever hears a witness becomes a witness. It's that, passing on. And the theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day really hits home at my day job with schools. Bridging generations. Bridging generations. And the Trust have actually described it as a call to action. A call to action. A call to action as generations come and go, we become more distanced from both the events of the Holocaust, the realization of what had taken place. And the Trust's call is to do that bridging. It's to do what Hannah does with you, Tim. It's to do what's happening in that incredible presentation you gave us there, to hand it on. And as I say, that's why all of us involved in education, we need to reflect on the news we've heard today about a reduction. We need to think and check and ask ourselves, are we doing all we can to ensure the baton is passed on in the schools for which we are responsible? Because when it comes to words like Holocaust, anti-Semitism, prejudice, genocide, even words like sanctuary, it's not enough just to know or say the words. To bridge generations, we need to hand them over with care. We need to hand them over thoughtfully. It's a conversation across history about the significance, the meaning of those words for us today. Remembrance is not enough if it's just about knowing facts. We're not swatting here for an examination. Though I have to say, as a primary teacher, the move from 10 years old to passing an 11 plus, that really got to me. That impressed me massively, that did, okay? Please pass that on. Yeah, that was just so impressive to hear. But no, it's not just having a memory, not just knowing facts. We must also hear them as a call to action. One of our colleagues, I think it was from King Edward's, one of our colleagues used this lovely phrase. You talked about us being active custodians. Have I got that right? Active custodians. I like that. I think that's a phrase we can all take with us. To actively remember, to understand the very idea of genocide, to understand it, to watch for it, to discuss it, to debate it, to keep these words in our understanding. It's one of the reasons why in this city some of us have, over the course of the past couple of years, been involved in this whole business of building and bridging understanding. It's one of the reasons we've been involved in an exercise to bring different faith groups together to discuss our heritage, our histories, our beliefs, and with Sheffield City Council to put together a charter that has renewed our commitment to make sure we do that job again and again and again. Because here's the thing I learned from that process, that 2 years, more than any other lesson I learned from it, more than any of the actual things that we learned from the synagogue, the mosque, or the other places of worship that we went to, wonderful though those various engagements were. It's that very simple lesson. You really, really learn when you sit together, when you encounter the person, when you sit together, sitting with folks like our rabbi, sitting with other leaders. That's when I feel a penny dropped for me in terms of going from book knowledge, RE lessons, that sort of thing, to really knowing something, understanding something. So important, so important. And it's when we see yourself showing us to pages like, I have to say, page 12. When you turn to page 12 of the list, that will stick with me now. That's another penny dropped, another example. So I just leave you that image of the baton being passed, that call to us to pass the baton. Communication is fraught with danger. It is so easy to drop the baton along the way, but to keep the baton passed on. And that's why seeing the 8 of you, the 2 different groups of 4 that we've had, just such an inspiring contribution that you've made, your 2 groups, and I know we've got others coming as well, have made for us this evening. So real thanks to you, particularly this evening, for that. To see that baton being passed on, that I would say is a fitting image to hold in our hearts as we contemplate this task of bridging generations. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, civic dignitaries, religious leaders, and of course the young people. Unscripted, I want to thank Hugh for that mention over there. When you said the penny dropped, I wasn't sure if that was a moment of realization or just your inability to catch things. It is both a privilege and an honor to be here today. And I'll leave you with my thoughts on this bridging generations. In classical Hebrew, the word for generations is dorot. And the word dor means to live or to sojourn. So generations are people that lived through events. The generation of the Holocaust experienced unspeakable cruelty, torture, and death. The survivors are dwindling away to a memory. So today makes us stop and remember that this is not history, this is a memory. In Hebrew, there's no word for history, because history, his story, is what happens to others. There is a word for memory, yizkor, because that is personal. The challenge today is to bridge into tomorrow's generations by making it personal, by making it a memory. As Jews read every year on the night of the festival of Passover, in every generation, one must imagine as if I myself have lived through Egypt and gone through the Exodus. So, to bridge the generations is to tell the story and to enable those stories to become part of the living memory of the next generation. Let me tell you a story about a woman called Elsa Grunsfeld. She's Hungarian and she was living in Vienna in 1939. She had 2 children, Eva, who was about 2.5, and a 7-week-old baby called Rebecca. They hear that the Austrian border is about to be closed that night. Unfortunately, it is a Saturday. It is the Sabbath. Religious Jews do not travel on the Sabbath. However, if it's a question of life and death, then they do. Other family members in Vienna prevailed upon her and they said, take the train, get to the border and get out before it's too late. She listened and she arrived at the border very late at night with her 2 children. Now, in those days, children were on their mother's passport. Eva was on Elsa's passport. But Rebecca, she'd only just been born, had not yet got onto her mother's passport. So at passport control, the presiding officer began to kick up a fuss. We can't let you through. We have a baby. She's not on the passport. At some point in the proceedings, a gentleman in a white coat appeared. It's not clear to me why. Eva, the 2-year-old, excuse me, had recently been in hospital and had bad experiences with people in white coats. She began to lose it and started crying and screaming. Eventually, the officer and the passport control lost his patience and just said, "Go through." So Elsa and her 2 children made it out to neighboring Hungary, and some months later managed to get across to England. Her husband, Oscar, had already arrived in Coventry. They were able to reunite, and they moved to Manchester, and they set up shop there, literally, because they bought a shop in Broughton Park, which is North Manchester. This Rebecca grew up in North Manchester. She went on to marry in 1960 and had 3 children: David, Faye Rochelle, and Joseph. They too grow up. The middle one, Faye Rochelle, has the enormous privilege and good fortune to be my wife, and she's sat here today. So I'm rather grateful to Auntie Eva for kicking up that fuss at that moment. And it shows you how these stories can become personal. We've created our own family, thank God. We have 12 children and an ever-increasing number of grandchildren. So do my brothers-in-law. And all of that just on the whim of chance events, although I personally believe it is the hand of God. So the generation after the liberation of prisoners from Auschwitz, the place where killing was turned into an industrial cause, we pause to remember. I point out this is one of the most developed and enlightened nations of its time, yet it was able to become the ultimate in Untermenschen. 81 years later, the wound is still war, and the healing is still a project in progress. The only weapon, I believe, to combat such evil revisiting humanity, God forbid, is to keep the memory alive and to teach the next generation to where racism, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and the like can lead. Teach men, women, and children of every nation, every race and faith to cherish life, both one's own and the lives of others, that every human being is made in the image of God, that every person carries within him or her a sacred spark which is his or her soul, and that is a part of God. That your birthday represents the day that God said, "I need you." Then not only will we keep the memories alive, but also the people. Don't lose your memories. So we can key the music. And the following song is about memories. I'm a very tired, old and worn out man, and my eyes have long been blind. Most things that people say to me just seem to slip my mind. Oh, but the suffering and the painful times that were in years long gone are still engraved upon my memory like the numbers on my yard. What will become of all the memories? Are they to scatter with the dust in the breeze? Who will stand before the world and knowing what to say when the very last survivor fades away? I hold my grandson close to me, and his fingers trace the pattern of my tears. He asked me, Grandpa, tell me why do you cry? What is it that you fear? Oh, and I tell him there once was another child that smelt this sweet and felt this warm, but he was taken from before my eyes, and only I remain to mourn. What will become of all the memories? Are they to scatter with the dust in the breeze? Or will stand before the world, knowing what to say when the very last survivor fades away? There is nothing I can do to make things change. Time has a way of passing by so fast. Like a fleeting shadow, no one will recall the faces of the past. Become of all the memories? Are they to scatter with their dust in the breeze? But one thought gives me comfort, it's all that I have left, for I know that God in heaven won't forget.
Thank you for your considered words, sharing your family's story, and for your song. It was very poignant. Thank you. I'd like to invite Imam Cameron Munir, who is the Lord Mayor of Sheffield's chaplain, to come and take us through the statement of commitment, which is found on the back page of your programme.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, shalom alaikum. Greetings to you all. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'd like to thank the Sheffield City Council and all of the people that have been involved in bringing this together and bringing us together at this time. Just a few words before I go on to the United Nations Statement of Commitment. I've always been someone who has felt very deeply the pain of others, the loss of others, and most often it reminds me of my own loss and the feeling of empathy, sympathy and compassion towards each other. And I extend my compassion and my sympathies to all of those who have been affected, both in the Holocaust and all the genocides that have taken place. So I begin by the United Nations Statement of Commitment. We recognize that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. Its unprecedented character and horror will always hold universal meaning. We believe the Holocaust must have a permanent place in our nation and community's collective memory. We honor the survivors still with us, We reaffirm our shared goals of mutual understanding and justice. We must make sure that future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We vow to remember the victims of the Nazi persecution and of all genocides. We value the sacrifice of those who have risked their lives to protect and rescue victims. As a touchstone of human capacity for good in the face of evil, we recognize that humanity is still scarred by the belief that race, religion, disability, or sexuality makes some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and discrimination still continue. We have a shared responsibility to fight these evils. We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocides. We will do our utmost to make sure that the lessons of such events are fully learnt. We will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by organizing an activity to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination, and racism. We value a free, respectful, and democratic society. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite you to join me in a minute's silence. Thank you. And as our final act this evening, I'd like to invite the Tapton School Music Department to come and share their musical reflection with us. Thank you.
Hi, so we're from Tapton and we are the music department, or part of the music department. It's such a pleasure to be here today, and thank you so much for inviting us. It's been an incredible service, and we will be singing Hallelujah for you.
I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to her kitchen chair, she broke your throne and she cut your hair, and from your lips she drew the hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Maybe there's a God above, but all I've ever learned from love was how to shoot somebody who outdrew you. And it's not a cry that you hear at night, it's not someone who's seen the light, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. I did my best, it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I did my best, I didn't